Hey everybody, this is Dream, and we have a 10-game slate today for the 2nd of November. Pretty solid slate. We got a lot of good games here. Let's go ahead and get an injury report. But before I do that, can you guys please smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel. With that said, let's get to injury report. So for the Celtics, Robert Williams is out. For the Kings, Fox is out. Lyles is questionable. For the Heat, Hero is questionable. For the Hawks, Okawangu is questionable. For the Knicks, Reddish is questionable. For the Hornets, Rozier is doubtful. For the Bulls, Drummond and White are both questionable, and Levine is doubtful. For the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard is out, and Covington is out. For the Rockets, Fernando and Tate are both out. For the Pistons, Duren is out. He's the backup center. For the Bucks, Drew Holiday is probable. For the Raptors, Van Vliet is questionable, and Porter is probable. For the Spurs, Keldon Johnson is questionable. Soccer is questionable but likely to play. Vassell is out and Wesley is out. I think Keldon Johnson is unlikely to play at this point. Mavs, the Wood is questionable. For the Grizzlies, Bane and Adams are both questionable. For the Trailblazers, Lillard is out and Hart is questionable. And for the Pelicans, Ingram is out and Jones is probable. For the Lakers, LeBron is probable and Davis is questionable. Now, obviously, those injury situations are going to make a lot of difference in the potential possibilities today. So we'll have to, you're gonna have to keep an eye on that today, especially with some of these injuries being late in the slate. That's gonna be a little bit more annoying. With that said, let's get into the players we do like today so far, at least based on what we know at this point. We're gonna start with Davion Mitchell for the Kings. He is going to be the go-to guy for the Kings now that Fox is out, and he has a nice amount of upside at this price point here on FanDuel. Not as ideal as DraftKings, but his price point is still pretty decent here. I do think he can get around 25 to 30 fantasy points in this matchup, and so I look for him to be a decent play. Then we're going to look at Drew Holiday for Milwaukee. Now, he does need to be, he is apparently got an illness, but he is probable to play. And if he does play today, then he will be a good option, considering the fact that he's been pretty great since without Middleton so far this season, and he's at a pretty decent price point here on FanDuel as well. Dennis Smith Jr. Has been really good with Rozier out, and now his price point has come up a little bit, but he's still in a good spot, and I still think he's a good play on the slate. And then Luka Doncic for Dallas is in a great spot here against Utah, and he's been absolutely dominating so far this season. He takes all the shots, and he gets all the rebounds and assists in most games. Even in the last game against Orlando, where he didn't get that many rebounds and assists, he still scored 58 fantasy points. I think he's in a great spot here against Utah. At shooting guard, we have Shaedon Sharpe for Portland, who should be the starter for that team at a very good price point for Portland with Lillard out. And I expect him to do big things in this particular matchup with that price point. Then DeMar DeRozan is a good option here for Chicago, assuming that Levine ends up ruled out. He'll be a good option on this particular slate. He's been really good with Levine out, and so that's what we look for with him. Gary Trent Jr. looks like he's in a solid place today, assuming that Van Vliet doesn't play again. I really do like him. Even if he does play, I still think he's a pretty decent option, but he's a little bit less safe as a result. Josh Richardson looks really good today, especially if Keldon Johnson is out. His price point is pretty solid today, and when he started, he's been over nearly 30 fantasy points each time, so I look for him to have a good game as well. Then we're going to look at Scotty Barnes for Toronto. This is also dependent a little bit on Van Vliet, but even if Van Vliet does play, he's still a decent option today at the price point that he's at, but if Van Vliet's out, he becomes a great play. Then we look at Harrison Barnes. He's a little bit too cheap. His price has come down, and he's been pretty consistent so far this season. Not being great, but he's been okay. But with Fox out, he's going to get some upside here. Giannis looks like he's in a great spot here against Detroit, and he's been absolutely dominating in all but one of their games. Now, he did not do quite as good the last time against Detroit, but I do expect him to bounce back and have an extremely good game again, especially if Drew Holiday ends up somehow being out. Gordon Hayward looks really solid today against Chicago. He's been just pretty consistent so far this season, and with Rozier out, he's been even better, and so I look for him to continue that. Zion Williamson looks really good today against the Lakers, who have been trash, and he's been pretty good so far this season. The only real risk with him is getting hurt during the game, which is always a risk with him. So do keep that in mind. Julius Randle looks pretty good here for New York against Atlanta. His price point's a little bit too cheap for his production so far this season, and I look for him to be a great play on this particular slate. LeBron looks pretty decent today, if assuming he does play, especially if Anthony Davis doesn't play. He looks like he'd be a guy that would definitely have an advantage. And this game isn't quite as tough as the last game it was against the Nuggets. And then Pascal Siakam for Toronto looks pretty solid today. I like him in this matchup here against San Antonio, and he shouldn't have too much resistance and able to be scoring a lot. Now, do note that if all the guys on Toronto end up playing that are considered questionable, then we do have to. Then I'd probably come off of him a little bit. But if he does, if they do have some injuries, then he's gonna take over just like he has been so far this season. For the centers, we have Nurkic for Portland. He should get more upside as a result of Lillard being out, and he did so in the first game. And he should have a plus matchup here against Memphis. Then Mitchell Robinson, he's been pretty solid for the Knicks, even though his minutes are a little bit inconsistent. He's getting 20 in the games that he's playing more minutes. He's getting over 30 fantasy points, and his prices come down some. His minutes are the concern, though, just because he's inconsistent. But he should get more run in this particular game. And then Alperen Sengun, he's been really good here for the Houston Rockets. Especially when he starts, he's getting over 30 fantasy points each time, and I look for him to continue that in this matchup. And then Mason Plumlee for Charlotte, he's in a great spot here. His minutes have been a little bit inconsistent because Nick Richards is playing really well behind him as the backup, but his price point is still pretty cheap, and he's a pretty good option on the slate. So with that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, or if there's any players you feel like I left out, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.